I upload daily NBA content on this channel, so if that is something that interests you, then subscribe. Also drop a like on this video. It only takes 1 second and it makes a massive difference. I just released a video earlier today about the Chris Paul trade, so if you have not watched that yet, then go watch it. In between these recordings, I got a haircut, but I'm still wearing the same clothes except for this jacket, so don't judge me. But I want to talk about the rumors of the Brooklyn Nets trading for James Harden. And these rumors have quickly turned from just kind of rumors on Twitter to this is a real possibility, because we've seen reports about James Harden and he's feeling a little bit tentative with Houston. Now, I don't think he's outright demanded a trade. There's been reports of things like that, but it seems like he wants to head to Brooklyn, but it also seems like he wouldn't hate staying in Houston. I do think there's a good chance we don't see a move like this for a good while, but that's not what I want to talk about today. I want to talk about why the Nets should not make this move, which I think on the surface to a lot of people is not going to make much sense, because why the hell would you not trade for James Harden if you can trade for James Harden? Well, I think it's pretty simple in the case of the Brooklyn Nets. As for why James Harden wants to be on the Nets, it makes sense because they're a team that's very talented, and it makes sense for the Rockets as well because that's a team that he can go there and play with some talent, but they also have young players to give with him, like Caris LeVert, Jared Allen. They have young guys and draft assets as well that they can get in exchange for James Harden. But in the case of the Brooklyn Nets, I honestly think that they would be a better team with Caris LeVert, Spencer Dinwiddie, Jared Allen, all their future first-round picks, instead of James Harden. Don't get me wrong, that is not me saying that all those players and picks have equal value to James Harden, especially in the case of this team that's trying to win now. Those first-round picks really do not matter all that much, though I will say the Brooklyn Nets have a history of being a little too focused on winning now to the point where they completely throw away a bunch of draft assets, so I would say be careful, though I won't say that's necessarily the same thing, because James Harden is clearly better than Paul Pierce and Kevin Garnett were at those ages. But James Harden, unfortunately to me, is going to be too much of something that the Nets already have, which is one-on-one creation. Now, a bunch of other reports have come out with the Houston Rockets and James Harden, and apparently James Harden wants to play in a team that has more ball movement and he doesn't want to be ISOing all the time, which I do find ironic because that's like what he is as a player, but also I've made the point in the past that he wasn't that player for his entire career. It was more Mike D'Antoni who was responsible for that, and a little bit of Daryl Morey as well. Though I do think it's odd that he would request to go to the Nets, but then also say he wants ball movement and says he doesn't want to ISO all the time, even though the Nets assistant coach is Mike D'Antoni. You're not getting ball movement in Brooklyn. That's not the team for that. If anything, I would ask for a trade to like Golden State if that was the case. The problem with that, and with him, with Kyrie Irving and Kevin Durant, is pretty simple. There's one ball, and I've seen people make false equivalences to other big threes throughout NBA history, but the thing is, pretty much every big three, you could find one guy who was more than willing to just be a guy who averaged like 18 points per game if need be. Look at the Golden State Warriors with Kevin Durant. Steph and KD were the top of that, and then Klay Thompson, he averaged like 20-22, but if he had a night where he shot the ball 5 times, he wasn't really going to complain about it. Big three Miami Heat, Chris Bosh was that guy. He averaged like 18, even sometimes like 16 points during the big three Miami Heatle era, and he didn't have an issue taking those few shots. That player does not exist in a big three of James Harden, Kevin Durant, and Kyrie Irving. I'm not saying that it's necessarily impossible that James Harden gets rid of this lack of ability off the ball. I'm not saying that James Harden is not willing to average just like 25 points per game. I'm not saying that Kyrie Irving and Kevin Durant are not willing to move off ball. I'm just saying in order for this team to succeed, it'd have to be more than just those guys being willing. It would have to be one of them at least becoming that player. And I think I have a video that I might end up doing called like a big three theory, where basically I think that the idea of a third star, even a star as good as James Harden, is not really worth it as much as bench depth instead would be. So like just get your 2-star players and then surround them with depth rather than just getting a third guy who's not going to be able to contribute as much as he should be for a player of his talent level. Like if instead of Chris Bosh, the Miami Heat had a bunch of better role players, I would argue that at least offensively they'd be a better team. Chris Bosh defensively was a big part of that, but in like the case of the Nets, there would not be that guy. Kevin Durant also showcased an ability to play off ball very well, but he also complained about it quite a bit. He said that he had issues with Golden State's system not wanting to allow him to ISO that much. So very clearly, even though Kevin Durant benefited deviated quite significantly from becoming more of an off-ball player at Golden State. It's clearly not something that he wants to be like back to doing at that level, and he would have to do that in this team. Like, I've seen a meme, someone recorded a video of the Nets in 2K with James Harden on the team, and they just did a million crossovers with each player on each possession, and it was like, yeah, that's pretty much what it would be. This would be undoubtedly the number one-on-one offense in league history. There would certainly be nights where this team just was simply unguardable because they have 3 players on their team who on any given night can be unguardable. Really 2 who are almost always unguardable. Kyrie Irving is pretty commonly unguardable. Sometimes he has off nights, like he's on the level of score of James Harden or Kevin Durant. And I will say, I would entertain a James Harden trade if you ended up moving Kyrie Irving. That might not be a good look on your franchise to move a guy who just signed there, but also, I mean, if you can have James Harden and Kevin Durant, you kind of do it, don't you? In terms of Kyrie Irving, James Harden, and Kevin Durant, I just think that's a bad recipe from on the court stuff. And then if we talk about on the court, these are 3 guys who all have their own egos. James Harden has showcased multiple times that he has problems fitting in with star players. There's no indication that he had beef with Russell Westbrook, but there is plenty indication of that with Chris Paul. There's plenty of indication of that with Dwight Howard, and I imagine on a team with these 2 egos in Kyrie and KD, we'd see that once more. Kyrie, look, I think he gets a lot of flack that he does not deserve, and a lot of the issues with him are over-exaggerated. However, it would be downright stupid to just act like he doesn't come with some baggage. Kevin Durant, the fact that he had issues at Golden State to begin with, the fact that he's not exactly loved over there despite all that he brought them, I think that says a lot about him as a player. I'm not saying that these are all like toxic people and that these guys can't be lead options. I'm just saying they all can on the same team. I think it's a recipe for disaster that 3 players that love to shoot the ball and love to handle the ball at this level on the same team, it's just, there's gonna be conflict. There's gonna be a lot of conflict, and this is not a team where you want 3 guys with that level of ego to have that conflict. So from an on-the-court perspective, 1 ball to share. On an off-the-court perspective, 1 ball to share. And unfortunately, it's also 3 guys who are really going to think they should be the guy taking the last shot. And then, obviously, if Kevin Durant comes back fully healthy, he should be that guy. But maybe James Harden disagrees. Maybe Kyrie Irving disagrees. When we get down to crunch time in games, are we not going to see what happened with Kevin Durant in Golden State when he took a shot and then Draymond Green was pissed off? And he was like, why did you take that shot? Play within the team. And on top of that, even though it's important to have guys who can create offense one-on-one, there can also be an issue where you have so many of those guys that you pretty much throw an offensive system out of the window, and while you might have the talent to overcome that to a degree, it ends up biting them in the ass. Look at like the 2018 Boston Celtics with Kyrie Irving. They had so many offensive options that there really was not an offensive system to that team. Everyone just kind of took turns shooting the ball. In the case of the Los Angeles Clippers, I made the point that that was a team that relied too much on one-on-one offense and too much on difficult shot making. That would be the case with this Brooklyn Nets team. Now, this would also be the best difficult shot making team in the league, but I would also argue that the Los Angeles Clippers are one of the best difficult shot making teams and probably the best back when they had those, or not back, they're still there, with those guys, and we saw how that went with the Denver Nuggets. So relying this much on ISO heavy guys with these kind of egos, to me, is a recipe for disaster. I'm not necessarily saying you don't trade for a 3rd guy like someone like Victor Oladipo or Bradley Beal. Those are guys that would be more content averaging just 20 points per game and spotting up for the most part. That's not going to happen with James Harden. Now again, if you want to trade James Harden and then trade Kyrie Irving, or maybe even trade Kyrie for James Harden, if Houston would be interested in that, I would not be in their shoes, but they might be. That would be interesting, and I'd probably do that, even though there could be a bit of a reputation hit there, which is ironic because the Nets got those guys because they built such a good reputation. I would not trade for James Harden while having him with Kyrie Irving and Kevin Durant. That's just too much of a good thing. And we've seen in the past with teams with too much of a good thing that does not have an overall mesh and an overall fit, that it does not go well despite the level of talent. Because no doubt the Nets would be the most talented team in the league if they made this trade, but they would not be the best team in the league because there's more to basketball than talent. There's more to basketball than star level players. There's an importance in an offensive system. There's an importance in a good culture. There's an importance in a level of team camaraderie. And I don't think any of that would exist with a Nets team that included James Harden. And I hope this doesn't come off as me just hating on James Harden, because as I said, if this was James Harden and Kevin Durant, it would be fine. If this was James Harden and Kyrie Irving, it would be fine. And if it's Kevin Durant and Kyrie Irving, I think it'll be fine. But if it's 3 of these guys, too much of a good thing. By the time you are seeing this video, I have more than likely released episode 3 of my NBA series on the Philadelphia 76ers. Ironically, I'm hoping that this James Harden trade does happen to the Nets because I don't want him on the Sixers because that would ruin that series for me. But go watch that series. I rebuilt around Ben Simmons and traded Joel Embiid to the Blazers for CJ and a whole bunch of draft assets. And I'm working on just building a championship team in Philly while building around Ben Simmons. So if that's something that interests you, I try to keep it realistic over there. And even if you don't enjoy 2K content, which I tend not to, it is actual basketball discussion happening with video games just being like the medium to display it. So go watch those videos, subscribe to the second channel where those videos are at. That's going to be linked to description, pinned comment, the card above. Look, it's right there. Look at it. Shout out to Rudy for editing this video. His link is going to be in the description. And that is the end of this video. Please be sure to like and subscribe for more NBA content like this, and cue the outro music.